tissue transplant. And as you know, not only kidney can be transplanted, heart can be transplanted. Heart, lungs, liver, cornea, and kidney. And also blood transfusion is a foreign thing to donate and transfuse from one person to another. The law and rule are on the way coming, guide. So we don't have a law and rule and guideline to refer. But as we know that there are two types of donors. One is relatives. There are two types again, relatives, blood relative, non-blood relative. Your wife can donate, this is not blood relation. And or in-laws, to that matter. Then another is your friends, teeth and teeth, friends, known, and also from humanitarian ground donors. These donors, as I said you, the foreign donors, that is two types, African and non-African. Non-African are from Asia and Europe. They came with their donors. And we just do the affidavit that no money and transaction or commercialization is involved. And with this affidavit and legal consent has been done. Number two, the donors from other African countries, apart from Kenya, all of them, they came from their respective country. Not a single Ugandan has taken Kenyan donor, or not a Burundian, not a South Sudanese. They brought their own donors. Number three, Kenyan passport. Whether their patient is from Western, they brought donor from Eastern, or the patient from Western brought donor from Western, the patient from Northeastern brought donor from Rift Valley, or Rift Valley to Rift Valley. So it is that type of. There are also relatives, there are also non-relatives. So waiting for the new law and rule will come and will be guided accordingly. So that is your answer, Mr. Jolly. Now, you have another question to me, that 38.4% patients. Can you repeat that question, Mr. Patel?
From the report, 30 to 94% of recipients have an unknown status, meaning lack of identification documents and patient record.
No. See, as I said you, our attorney said, and I also said, all the affidavits, records are given to Kenya Medical Dentist Board Council. The first week, second week of May, or third week of May, I don't remember the exact date. So they have also received, and we have the hard copy, original. And we can provide you, if you can get a court order for Data Protection Act, then we can give you all the data. So no problem there. We have all 100% data. Any question to me, Mr. Patel? Now, Mr. Leon, thank you very much. Your question to me, I will give you 2, 3. One is, first you said as a human, the person, what we started, what is the way forward? Way forward is very simple. If Mishra and Mediheal is really culprit, we carry the cross. And if we are innocent, in the name of God, please give us justice, we carry 1,000 times better and bigger and stronger passion. Mediheal doesn't belong to Mishra. Medi belongs to Africa and Africans. It will go all over Africa. Thank you very much. Any question, please? Okay. So then, thank you.
Remarks on what we've seen from the media, the communication of what is allegedly captured in the report will be able to receive. As you've seen and as we've already introduced, we have both donors and recipients here. And this forum, in many ways, even exits what the committee did because they didn't have an opportunity to, they did not go out of their way to get the input of the donors and patients. Now, this is almost the third time we are saying, but we want to put a lot of emphasis on this, that we supply every single material that the ministry committee asked for. And I just want to emphasize this, that some of the things we gave them were the medical notes for all the patients. And when I say all the patients, I'm talking of 476 patients. So when we see in the media allegation of gaps in terms of medical documents missing, it cannot be Mediheal. Now, the deliveries of each of those documents was documented. The documents themselves were paginated. We have returned copies, and we dare the committee or anybody to say there is any one of those patients data that was not there. So to the extent to which the committee may have said in their report, unless the media misreported, to the extent to which they could have said that there was any medical detail that was missing in terms of the files, that's false. We also supplied 476 affidavits times 2. And why it is times 2 is that there were 2 affidavits, the donor and recipient. And the 476 patients are both Kenyan and foreign. We supplied every single patient's affidavit. Now, to the extent to which we've seen in the media that they say there were some affidavits missing or the affidavits had shortcomings, that's completely false, and we dare the committee bring out the report that we supplied to them, and where we have the return copies and we can demonstrate that indeed they had them, and if they did not see them, it is as a result of their leadership. Now, there is one aspect of it that also we need to point out. In all those files, in all those affidavits, they had asked us also for the contact details, not only of the patients, but also of the doctors, and even of the advocates who were involved in the making of those affidavits. Now, when they criticize the issues in terms of patient details, in terms of patient contacts, all those were supplied. We do not seem, gleaning from what the media has said, them saying that they contacted any of those patients or any of those doctors and found any of the information we supplied to them to be inaccurate. And so when they criticize, either in terms of signing, in terms of dating, in terms of propriety of the documents, we are completely puzzled. We are amazed. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention also is that the patients themselves have a WhatsApp group. And I need to say that the WhatsApp, I just need to say that in respect to what we noted from the media, that they say we did not have a proper follow-up procedure. We need to explain that the 476 patients is constituted of both domestic, that is Kenyan patients, and non-Kenyan patients. The WhatsApp group had about 277 membership. This is constituted of the patients in Kenya. And the WhatsApp group was meant for encouraging each other, for solidarity, for sharing experiences in the journey of their treatment. Now, from time to time, somebody would have an exceptional issue and they would chat with the doctors on the site, and Dr. Murthy will address that issue. And so we had a very robust follow-up process. They also had a follow-up process, as Ben has explained. They had intervals of about 3 months to see the doctor if they needed to, and as time went on, either at intervals or when an issue arose. And so we really had a very good follow-up process. For international patients, The situation is that most of the time the patients would have been referred to Mediheal from out of Kenya by their nephrologists, by their doctors. And so after the treatment, more times than not, the patients would follow up with their respective doctors. Dr. Murphy will also explain is that where those doctors, for those patients, had issues, they could call him or call the other doctors at Mediheal when they follow up issues. And so we really had a very robust follow-up issue. And I just wanted to explain that that contention by the committee that there was no robust follow-up infrastructure or system at Mediheal is also false. Now, the committee also says that we had a number of things missing. One was the criteria of determining the recipient donor matching, the issue of standard operating procedures, the issues of policies of infant transplant, infection prevention, quality management, and data protection. On this again, we are saying we dared them because we supplied each of those. We had SOPs, the standard operating procedures applied to them. In that standard operating procedures, which we are ready to share with the media, it incorporated the policies on kidney transplant, infection prevention, quality management, and we had an overall hospital data management policy. And so when they say we didn't have criteria, we didn't have policy, we didn't have procedures, it is completely false, and we share with them those items. Just before I go far, I just need to go back again to that issue of follow-up. From the media, they say there was a deficiency in follow-up, and we get the impression also from other media, because of course we were following all the various medias. It would seem that on one hand they say there was no follow-up, and on another hand they admit that there was follow-up. And indeed we supplied them with the information in relation to the follow-up. Now, the other issue I wanted to cover is the issue of documents. There are three issues the committee seems to have, shadowing from the media reports. They seem to have taken up issues about documentation. One is that there were cases where the citizenship of some patients was not known. Others, they have said there was uncertainty in terms of the gender of the patients. And when I use patients, I'm using it loosely to refer to both donors and recipients. And as Dr. Mishra has explained, we made sure that there was care for the donors also, and we lost no donor. And so to the extent therefore that we were taking care of them, we consider them to have been our patients and our concern. We just want to say this. In terms of citizenship, each of the files we supplied to them, where it was a Kenyan citizen, we supplied the ID numbers of copies of the ID of both the recipient and the donor, and an affidavit sworn to support that. In terms of foreign patients, we had copies of passports, without exception, plus affidavits. And so when they say they weren't able to find some details of some of the patients in terms of citizenship or gender, that's completely false. There are instances also where they say, from what we see, they weren't sure whether one was a recipient or a donor. As far as we are concerned, from our records, and we are saying 100% of our records, with mathematical absoluteness, we are given all those details. The other issue the committee has taken is the authenticity of the documents. Now, we seem to see a situation where the committee did not check up with any of them, because as I already said at the outset of my commentary, we supplied them with the details of contact either of the patient or of the people who referred the patients to us. And if there are any doubts about the signatures on the affidavits, the authenticity of the IDs, the authenticity of the passports, we would have expected that they would check with those respective entities. They did not. They merely just threw in an allegation that there was question of authenticity on the documents. And this includes the Israeli patients. And on this issue of the documents also, there is the allegation that the documentation that they were able to see had questions relating to identification. On that, we want to concede that on our part as Mediheal, when two patients come, that is the donor and the recipient come, and we are satisfied that they are eligible for the procedure, and they present their documents, and they have signed and sworn an affidavit. We did not have capacity to go and authenticate either their IDs or their passports. And so if the committee wants to say that indeed we did not go beyond the phase of what we were told and the phase of the documents we were given, we admit that it's true because we did not have capacity. We also don't think that is what hospitals do, that the hospitals need to verify or second guess what their patients are saying. If the patients meet the medical criteria, if on the face of it they are believable, we do not have a reason to doubt them, and we do not have the wherewithal to go behind what they have said. Now, there is the contention that we had very limited personnel. Okay, there are various allegations of personnel, that we did not have qualified personnel, we had Indian personnel, and that we had limited personnel to the extent that we were conducting surgeries using one surgeon and one anesthetist. And we want to say this, that Mediheal had two surgeons and 4 anesthetists. However, the distinguishing state of affairs at Mediheal is that their laparoscopic process is such that one anesthetist and one surgeon can conduct the surgery of both the donor and the recipient. And that was very possible because of the type of the cutting edge facilitation they had. And so we just want to answer that question by saying, yes, we had more than, we had 4 anesthetists and 2 surgeons, but the laparoscopic process that we had was such that one anesthetist and one surgeon can do that. And we also want to say that we are disappointed that they didn't distinguish Mediheal on this point, that Mediheal was the only hospital in Africa that was conducting laparoscopic kidney transplant. Of course, laparoscopic surgeries are there in Kenya on other medical services, but on surgery it was only Mediheal that was doing that, and that it was the 5th in the world that was doing that. Or rather, it was one of the 5 that was doing that. In terms of personnel also, we want to say that we distinguished ourselves by both having the best recruitment processes, we had qualified personnel. The Indian doctors that were serving, who were about 2,300 personnel at Mediheal. The Indian personnel represented about 14 or 13% of the total human resource establishment of Mediheal. And each of those non-Kenyan doctors went through the process of verification, certification, and licensing by the medical board. So it's not true that they sneaked in or that they were conducting their affairs in any improper manner. We have seen also that there are comments about their licenses. Each of them had up-to-date licenses. And so both our Kenyan personnel and our foreign personnel were highly qualified. And I am made to understand this, that they were the most, or rather, they were most highly paid. And probably the personnel, if you had an opportunity to talk to them, you could glean that. The other criticism that we've been subjected to is the allegation that we used unlicensed foreign laboratories. Now, the laboratories were used to determine the propriety of the gene matching between the donor and the recipient. And it's true, we used foreign labs, we want to admit that. But we want to say 3 riders to that point. The first one is that in each case where we outsourced the lab services, we had a contract setting standards of what we expected from them and providing for confidentiality of the patient material. Number 2 is that the committee was so forthcoming to criticize us, but do not acknowledge that indeed they do not have a policy, they do not have a rule, they do not have any regulations on how to deal with those laboratories, where you have to outsource the laboratories. And therefore, when we went out of our way to obtain contracts for that purpose, we think, as far as we are concerned, we distinguish ourselves and we took the necessary measures to secure our situation. And we were very diligent in making sure that the health of the patients and the health of the patients was protected. And as it is, as we speak now, there's nobody complaining, either that their specimens were abused, or that their confidentiality was misused, or that as a result of outsourcing those services, they have suffered an adverse medical situation. Probably two issues before I close. The committee, from what we see, went on to say that based on the pricing that Mediheal used, it is an indicator of the possibility that there was, I will use the word that is so captured probably by the media, that the Kenya might have become kidney source country. This is completely false as far as Mediheal is concerned. There is no time when Mediheal was involved in matching a non-analysis. And I'm repeating this, Dr. Mishra said, but we just need to emphasize that. The second thing, there is no case where a non-Kenyan went away with a Kenyan organ. There is no case where a non-Kenyan went away with a Kenyan kidney. Every kidney of every Kenyan was given out to a Kenyan recipient, and the two of them came after agreement. And we have a sample of both patients here and this other side, and we invite you to thoroughly examine that. We had expected the committee to have done only that. The criticism they have made about the age gaps, gender gaps, and those ones we have no control over. Now, on the issue of the pricing, we are made to understand that the pricing they have indicated is that, of course, Mediheal was charging about 2 million shillings for Kenyan patients transport. That is to conduct procedure, testing, and transplanting the kidney. A Kenyan would pay 2 million. Now, the committee, from what the media says, seems to have said that was a high price, that was a high cost, and that cost would order on indicating or suggesting that indeed there was commercialization of the kidneys. That is completely false. First of all, the charges that Mediheal was asking for, as far as we are concerned, and we are saying this in point because we also check, is less than $1,000 charge. And we just want to exercise caution also. We don't want to put anybody else on the line, but we want to say, as far as we are concerned, it was much less than what other places are charging. And as media personalities, it would be very nice of you if you could also check what other institutions were charging, and to then make a judgment and commentary on whether that allegation has any basis. With that, I would like to end my commentary. I probably should just say one last thing. The committee from the report seems to have criticized the infrastructure of Mediheal. And Dr. Mishra said that didn't quite go much into it, but I just want to say this. That Mediheal in the last couple of years has been scaling down its operations, and the scaling down of the operation is so significant to the extent that they are operating at about 10% of the original capacity. Out of 28 services that they are providing, they are providing about 2 services, or rather they are providing 2 services as at the start of this year. That is only kidney kidney transplants and reproductive health services. And yet, originally they were providing 28 services, and as Dr. Mishra had explained, it includes open heart surgery, bone reconstruction, and all that. Out of 12 units, they were operating only one unit, that is Eldoret. Out of 2,300 staff, they are now operating with about 50 staff. And out of monetary turnover of about 700 million, they are operating at about 70 million as at the start of the year. And so they are operating at less than 10%. The consequence, therefore, is that some of the infrastructure that were meant to provide for this 100% performance have been left idle. The committee then, from what we see from the media, goes on to criticize how the place is dilapidated, how there is leakage in the walls, how the place may not be clean. But surely, if we have not been operating 100%, if we have not been using those facilities, how do you expect those facilities to not to have dust? And so we think the committee were premeditated in their approach. They also criticized us by saying this, that we are coordinators, and for ease of reference, for ease of understanding, coordinators, what I would say, they were marketers. They were the ones who are notifying other hospitals that we have kidney transplant facilities at Mediheal. That's what they were doing. Now, what the committee says, from what we see, says those marketers ought to have been medically trained, and we find that it's extremely ridiculous. If we were to give it full meaning, it would mean when you advertise in airlines, Kenya Airlines, Ethiopia Airlines, and all those, you need to have a kind of advertising process. As far as we are concerned, for purposes of transplant, is Section 80 of the Health Act. That Section 80 requires that there is a satisfaction on the part of medical provider that the person who is donating his organ, in this case kidney, is doing it voluntarily, that it's not being given out for monetary consideration, it's not being given under coercion. We satisfied that, we had affidavits confirming the donors saying that indeed they are doing it voluntarily. And so we were in compliance with the law. We've seen reference to Istanbul Declaration. And we are very personal that I think this is the point that my friend Oigo was saying, that if they had a lawyer, they would have realized that Istanbul Declaration is not law. It is not law in Kenya, it's not law anyway. It's just a declaration of recommendations of what should be done while you're dealing with organ transplant. And so we want to put a lot of emphasis on saying that we are in compliance. In closing, and as I invite you for questions, I want to say that we are waiting for a copy of the report. When we get the report, we will make a more informed decision on the unfortunate things that the committee made against us. We will now invite questions, and we are interested only in questions relating to these issues of the report. The kidney transplant at Mediheal. Please don't ask us about other unrelated issues. And we will not answer questions that are unrelated to that issue. You're welcome to ask us your questions.